And he said, the only reason money will ever come to you is if you're fixing something for someone. And his mindset was physical. You've got to actually fix things. Yeah. But he was right. Fix things for someone else and money will flow.
Welcome to the Driven Young podcast with Byron Dempsey, dedicated to educating and inspiring the younger generation around entrepreneurship and practical life skills we aren't taught in school. Created for young people who seek direction in establishing their goals and passions. This podcast provides a platform for discussing the steps taken by professionals in their field related to handling finances, making money online, starting a business, growing a network, and much more. And now your host, Byron Dempsey.
Welcome back to the Driven Young podcast. Today is a special episode because I'm joined by Glen Carlson. Glen gave me a job out of high school to create videos for him, and I was able to follow him, learn from him, and get access to his network and the clients he works with. The only reason I'm here today and doing this podcast is because of Glen, so I'm super grateful and excited to have him on the show today. Glen is a co-founder of Dent Global and the key person of Influence Accelerator program. They offer training, advisory, and business services to the rising stars of business. In the last 6 years, they've expanded internationally with a team of 45 across 12 time zones with offices in the UK, USA, Singapore, Australia, and Canada. In this episode, we get deep into Glen's story, how he completed high school while traveling around the world on a boat, the most valuable skill that will allow you to earn hundreds of thousands of dollars in any industry during your 20s, and how money doesn't equate to happiness, and much, much more. I really hope you enjoy this episode and get some value. Now, over to Glen.
Glen, welcome to the podcast.
Mate, I'm stoked. Yeah,
been a long
well
time
played.
coming. I keep getting people saying, when's Glen coming on the podcast? Rena was like, Byron, are you having Glen on the podcast? So we'll jump straight into it.
Yeah, man.
Ask this question for every guest. What did you do after high school, and what are you currently up to with your life, and kind of how did you get to where you are?
Yeah, right. So maybe some context on high school. So when I was 6, my dad retired. My dad was in the Navy. He started when he was 15. My mum was a hairdresser, so fairly kind of everyday sort of Aussie family.
Yeah.
Difference was Dad was a bit of an adventurer, so he built our boat and we sailed around the world for 7 years, right? So I'd lived this life of like travel and adventure and diving on wrecks and, you know, climbing the pyramids literally and just kind of mad. And I kind of had this experience that anytime I met someone, you'd have a chat with them, they'd have a chat with you, you'd make friends, it was easy. When I got to high school, which was on the Sunshine Coast up in Queensland, I went to Maroochydore High School, and it was the first time that I'd ever experienced this reflection back to me from society, I suppose, or kids, right, that I wasn't enough. Right? And I was bullied, and I wasn't like kind of weird, but I lived such a different life. I approached things in such a different kind of way. Whereas the way my high school at least was structured is you had your homies and your skegs and your rappers and you had your jocks and your skaters, and like there were all these different little cliques. And I'd never seen anything like it.
Because you didn't really go to primary school.
I went to primary school a little bit. I think I went to primary school for a year before we left, and the rest was just home study. Yeah,
while you were traveling the world, which is probably the best way. I reckon. It sounds amazing.
So Australia has a thing called distance education, and it was started for kids out on farms that were like miles away from anywhere. And of course, this is before internet and all that sort of stuff. So we'd tell the school that we'll be in Cairo in the next couple of months, and they'd send a box of books to the to the port master's office, and we'd pick it up when we got there. So, and it was up to me to do school. So I was fairly self-initiated. I was self.
Got that discipline early on.
Well, not so much discipline. It was my parents just went, "This has to be done." And it's interesting when you look at school. If you take all the breaks and all the bullshit out of school, there's about 3 hours worth of real activity.
Yeah.
Right? Because even when you get to class, it's like, 45 minutes? There's fluff at the start, there's fluff at the end. So it turns out I could do an entire week's worth of school in a day on the boat. And my parents were just like, if you do a week's worth in a day, you can have 4 days off. right? So I started to get my head around, some days I'll do more, some days I'll do
You just
less.
gun it for an entire day,
And
just
I'm
focus.
done it, and then I can go swimming for the rest of the week,
Yeah.
type stuff. So that was my mindset when I came back to school, which was not that. Like everyone was very much in their kind of box. And I think the way they were trying to express their individuality was through like, I wear long shorts, I wear short shorts, I wear a wallet chain, I'm a
Social
surfer.
acceptance.
It was that social caricature that they would create. I mean, you remember homies? Like full on rappers, and it's like, dude, like...
I remember them in primary school.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't fit that. Because I didn't fit that, there wasn't a box for me, right? Because I wasn't the nerdy kid in the library, but I also wasn't the sports jock. I was this weird little kind of didn't fit anywhere. And what do you do with the kid that doesn't fit? Well, a couple of kids are going to spot him and kind of hit him. So anyway, I had to learn how to defend myself. I had to learn how to fight. I ended up putting a couple of kids in hospital, and as a result, I stopped getting bullied. But it was, you know, it was a process. So, and I started surfing, and surfing was the answer for
your
me.
escape?
It started off as an escape, and what ended up happening was I started meeting people out there in the water, and it turns out the surfers were a reasonably influential group in our school. And so while I was never like the alpha surfer dude, I became accepted into a clique, I suppose, that was fairly invincible against all the other cliques. But to me, it was still stupid. But at least I was surfing. All the surfer kind of guys and girls had cool parties. Life got easier, right? So that was, but but like I guess I've always, because of my background of adventure, I like a bit of freedom. I was feeling constrained by this whole school thing, and so uni was coming up, and I'm like, my parents were pretty. So long as I'm making clean decisions, they were happy to let me do whatever I wanted. And so they'd examine my decisions, and I decided I wanted to go to Sydney. I wanted to get a job in a bar, and I just wanted to kind of like go and see the world. And I thought, you know, a bar is a cool place where there's parties, there's people, there's late nights, there's that kind of an environment, and I thought that would be cool. So I moved to Sydney, and I learned how to throw bottles around and flair bartend, and worked in a couple of the key kind of clubs and bars in Sydney, making a fortune in tips. You know, there was girls, there was guys, there was partying, it was that kind of life. And it kind of probably went a bit too far in some of the substances that I started to enjoy to make the most of the nightlife. And it started to get to the point where it became more about the drugs and the partying than it did the exploration and the adventure. And I started to have that awareness. And I actually reached back out to my dad, and I'm just like, because my dad's always been pretty practical, gives me a lot of rope, and in exchange I've always felt that I could call him up and just kind of give it to him straight. And I was like, no, I feel like I'm a bit off course. Like inspect my head. And he'd ask me a few questions, ping back and forth. Anyway, I decided I didn't want that life, right? I didn't want the life of, you know, being a bartender till I was 30. The people that I most respected were the owners of the bars and the entrepreneurs, and I thought, shit, I need to learn how to make money, I need to learn how to be in business. And so I went to uni up on the Sunshine Coast. They'd just opened a brand new uni. It was really well funded, it was gorgeous, and they had the business degree. So I'm like, oh well, if I want to learn how to be free, I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk wasn't here then. There wasn't YouTube that I could watch. So I went and I did my first year, and I'm not a natural studier. I had to work. I was putting in at least 6 hours a day to study, like proper study, plus courses and classes and all that sort of stuff. And I did well, and simultaneously I was running the boat cleaning business that I started. Because I knew boats, I thought I could clean boats, I could go diving, and I could clean the hulls of boats. So I got my diver's license and all that sort of stuff. And that was probably making me about 150 grand a year, which as a kid, like, it's all right. But I was working, right? Again, I'm putting 8-hour days into that. I'm putting plus my 6 hours into uni. Like, I was working because I wanted it, and I saw the alternative of being a drop kick. I didn't want to be a drop kick. I didn't want to work in like corporate evil either, right? And my
somewhere in
parents,
between.
yeah, my parents couldn't teach me how to do business or be an entrepreneur or something like that. So the only thing I knew how to do was work. So I worked and did well at uni. Finished in the top 1% of my class, which is like the top 1 or 2 people at the end of the year. But the problem is that my tutors that were teaching me about business, they hadn't started successful businesses of their own. They were like consultants, and that was sort of their claim to fame, I suppose.
This is like I did. So in high school, I got to do my motorbike. I think you've seen it. So I got to like basically rebuild a motorbike. And my teacher was a mechanic who had been in the mechanic for like 20 or 30 years. So he had all this experience, and he was telling us that the future people who are going to be replacing him are going to be like book mechanics. So they've studied. They've never worked on anything in their life, and they're coming in just based off books. And it's like, man, if you've ever worked on a car or anything, books do not, sure.
They don't cut it.
But everything goes wrong. Yeah. Especially when it was a 1983 bike. Everything goes wrong. And he's like, oh yeah, I've dealt with this before. And he was great. And I'm like, oh, how can you, I don't want to learn from someone who's just studied in a book.
That's the issue. And I mean, things like Harvard and Stanford and these, like they actually have the clout to bring in
of course,
real business leaders to give you some real stuff, right? But I mean, I didn't have access to that kind of stuff. So because I was cleaning these boats, I went to a lot of the guys that owned the boats, right? And here's, I guess, because I was young, I could cash in on being young and hungry, right? There's a lot, I mean, you'll be experiencing this as well. A lot of doors open super easy when you're young and you've got some hustle. So I was young and I had some hustle. So when I asked these very successful, wealthy, mostly men that owned all these boats that I was cleaning for some advice, they were all like, yeah, come over. So they invited me over to these homes, and these are like 8-bedroom, massive mansions on the water, like, whoa. And they told me 2 things. The first was learn how to sell, right? The second was only learn from people that are getting the results that you want in your life.
So not your teachers.
Well, I looked at my teachers and they're fucking riding to work on their bikes, and I'm just like, no. Like, if they were pulling up in their Ferrari or their, even just their like BMW 7 Series or something, and you got that flavour that they were living the dream. They weren't. They were academics. So I quit. And again, I just explained to my parents, look, this is the reality. I was at uni to get the outcome of being able to start my own business. All of these mentors have taught. The other key thing I had is I finished in the top percentage of my class, and I hadn't learned anything I could apply into my actual business.
Which is what this podcast is all about.
Right?
You learn so much in school that's not applicable.
Not applicable, right? It's pure, it's rote learning, it's, they're a business, right? And it's just like, just churn them out, give them the paper. But I didn't want the paper because I didn't want to work for someone else. Right, and the moment I decided I wanted to work for myself, no bit of paper is gonna help me hire a team or make a sale. So that was the advice of learn how to sell. And so I moved to Melbourne and I took a job and I learned how to sell.
Still with the end goal in mind that you're gonna be an entrepreneur, have your own business.
In some way, shape or form, I was gonna be in command of my own destiny. I didn't have a particular, we certainly wasn't using the word entrepreneur because at the time it wasn't the cool thing. Alan Bond was the entrepreneur and he was the evil.
Or Kerry Packer or something.
Well, right. Well, So no, entrepreneur, Kerry Packer was a businessman, but entrepreneurs were seen as the wheelers, the dealers, the hustlers, and often nefarious, not above board. It was a dirty word. It's being sanitized now and it's becoming the cool thing.
It's almost flipped on its head. It's
totally
almost
flipped,
cringy if you call yourself an entrepreneur because everyone's an entrepreneur.
Right, well, again, it's going that way too. But so that was kind of the journey. And so while I didn't have that idea in my head, I wanted to be the master of my own destiny. I didn't want anybody else telling me what to do or when to do it. And that was, I guess, the key idea. And so I got a job in sales. And I guess that's the short story, I guess, in the transition from high school to needing to push against that, to going a bit off the rails, over experimenting with my new freedom. I can take drugs and drink and do whatever I want. That has its consequences if it's not applied, if it's not kept in check.
Yeah, which you figured out. You went, I need to get out of this.
The beauty is I wasn't rebelling against anything. I was exploring the world, but I wasn't driven to try and rebel against my parents or society. I wasn't angry.
You was doing it for you.
I was just doing it for me. And because I was doing what I was doing for me, the reflection of, this isn't fun anymore, you've had one pill, you've had them all, sort of a thing. And, by the time I was 25, all that was behind me.
Yeah. You brought up a good point though, because in a previous, last week I had a guest on, and he spoke about a plane going from New York to London doesn't go straight. It kind of veers off this way. But
Constantly, of course.
It always ends up at London. Yeah. And so I like how you're like, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I need to learn how to sell. Yeah. So people just want to start their own business straight away. And so, for me, I came into Dent, and that Dent was my uni.
Yeah.
I got to learn. Like, if I'd started without that, I would have been screwed.
Well, the advice I gave you when I first met you is whether we end up working together or not, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to be your own leader, put yourself in the orbit of a successful founder of a small business. Because you're never going to be able to put yourself in the orbit of Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Whereas I had a small business, we're doing millions in revenue. It's a small enough team that you can add value on the fringe and still have access.
And you get to see how it works.
See how the whole thing works. So my advice to the young hustlers is get yourself a skill set that earns you the right to work in a small business that's successful, that's growing, that's on a mission. Work for cheap and earn yourself into the good graces of the founder where they can notice young hustle. And then you will be able to see a 360-degree perspective of what it actually takes to run a business.
100%.
Because, I think a lot of the young hustlers, the Gary V kind of set, they got no idea, and they think if I can post a video funnel and a landing page and a thing that's business, and it's just not.
No, there's so many more hacks. Team, finance,
right.
It's so complicated.
It's a machine, and I think there's this desire to want to jump
past the learning phase
and go straight to owning a business, right? Whereas, I did my 10,000 hours in sales, learning how to sell, and in reflection, when I'm talking to team, or I'm talking to suppliers, or I'm talking to partners, or I'm talking to our speakers or mentors, it's all sales, right? Bringing a new team member on board, it's selling them on the vision, the values, the high standards. Bringing a client on board, bringing a client that wants a refund, bringing a client that's unhappy. Like that ability to communicate around a problem towards a solution is sales.
Yeah, and everyone will use it in their life, whether they realize it or not. You've got to sell yourself to get a job.
Yeah.
You've got to sell yourself at a job interview,
and look,
or whatever.
There are some exceptions, right? So there are some exceptions for the hyper-specialized craft, right? So, for example, if my daughter, and you might be able to hear her in the background, she's not very happy at the moment. If she suddenly decides that she has a deep desire and has a skill set and a talent for AI, deep mind, machine learning, coding type stuff, I would not be suggesting sales. I'd be saying go deep into that.
Of course.
Because, Google will pay you $5 million a year for that kind of talent, and you'll be able to write your own kind of rules, right? In the same way, Mark Zuckerberg didn't have to kind of learn how to sell in the traditional sense because he went deep into the algorithm, right? But the problem is the Zuckerbergs and the deep mind coders,
sort of thing.
right? So I didn't have that. I was more of the generalist. I was pretty good at a lot of things, right? Like I could go out and have a good time at my mates with the club, right? I could go out the next day and bring in a whole bunch of sales and break some records. I could, I'd learn how to speak from stage, and I kind of got to the point where I was this kind of all-rounder, but I was never insanely great at any one thing.
Yeah.
But that diverse skill set's also very useful in a small business founder kind of mindset.
It's kind of crucial almost.
So it's kind of like unless you're a super genius at something proper, then my experience is sales is pretty fundamental.
Yeah.
If you want to be free.
And the best way you would say don't do a sales course is get a job doing sales.
Get a job doing sales.
And
do all the sales courses, read all the sales books, and get a job ideally that's got a strong bias to commission upside. So either commission only or a very, very high upside. And ideally something where it's just the rejection is brutal. Door-to-door knocking. If I could go back and write my own script, I'd say, Glenn, get a job for a year going door-to-door trying to sell something.
To build up that tolerance.
And that tolerance, and then high volume. So I was making 100 attempts a day, just bang, 6 days a week. Now the key is making really good money on that. And so that's the difference, is that the beauty is you get yourself into a commission only and it'll be high commission. This is where you can be under 25 making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And that skill set can then be reapplied to every single element required to build a business.
Yeah, great.
So
and that's
basically you learn how to build a business while making a lot of money. And if you can sell, every founder of a small business between $1 million and $10 million wants top performers that can make sales and close business and are willing to take responsibility for it, hence commission only or close to commission only. Your ability to pick what industry or what company you want to work for, because if you're a great salesperson with a great track record, you can pick any business and talk to the founder and say, you got a sales problem and I'm your solution, and you'll get the job.
And look at the difference between doing that versus doing a business degree. It's like massive.
The only reason you should do university is if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or
some traditional,
an engineer,
psychologist,
right, all that sort of stuff.
Well, you actually need a degree.
I mean, it's all going to be replaced by AI anyway. But to learn if you want to be the manager of a corporate, right? Like if you imagine yourself as the CEO of Telstra or something at some point. Get a degree, turn that degree into a master's, turn that master's into an MBA, masters of business administration. It's how to run an existing company.
Not start one.
Well,
you have to do everything, as we mentioned.
Yeah, not start one. I mean, incubators.
Yeah.
You're better off going to startup weekends and incubators and, coming up with that sort of stuff. There would be some minor exceptions, would be that if there was a university, so Stanford has a great track record of spitting out entrepreneurs, right?
But it probably also provides high quality connections.
Exactly my point, right? And so if you choose a university through the mindset of it's your incubator to launch your businesses, and you're in there launching businesses, not learning how to do it, but you're actually launching businesses and you're using that environment, you're breaking all of their rules, but using their faculty and you're getting in their head and you're asking them who they know, and you use that as the environment to test shit, launch shit, scale shit, and you use the credibility of the university to open other doors for you, then I would say make the most of it. But most people don't use universities, they passively consume the curriculum as though that's some magic.
They do the bare minimum and they'll be like, I'm working hours and hours studying and stuff. It's like,
100%.
It's actually the bare minimum.
100%.
And you can be doing more. And I've talked about it in other episodes where it's like, during uni, you can be building your network. So by the time you're 24 or you're finished, you've got some network you can reach out to and opportunities.
Yeah. You can do uni and have a full-time sales role.
There you go. And the crazy thing is, so why I kind of started this podcast is like, for people who go, I don't know what to do. If I don't go to uni, I don't know what to do. We've just given you a solution right now. Go find, learn sales, read the books.
Go sell something that helps people. Go learn how to sell something that helps people, because your ability to, really what sales is the ability to transform a no into a yes. Now, imagine that. Imagine we live in a universe of locked doors, right? Well, what advice would you give someone? Well, learn how to cut keys, right? Because if you could learn how to pick locks and cut keys, in a world of locked doors, key picking is the skill.
Yeah.
So the way I think about it is, if everybody in the world said no to me, I wouldn't get very far. If everybody in the world said yes to me, I would get a long way. How do I get to the yeses? What's the pick? How do I turn a no to a yes? It's sales. Sales is the ability to influence from a no to a yes. And so I would encourage everybody to master that for 10,000 hours. And ideally, you want to do it in an environment that has something to do with something you're in some way interested in.
Yeah.
But the beauty is, you get good at sales, you can leave and change and move to a new industry like that.
The sales are sales.
And they'll have you.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to get a good sales job, especially if you're in a small entrepreneurial business, right? Because it's the one thing that they often really struggle with. And if you've learned how to back yourself, where you'll take a tiny base but a major upside, it's an easy Yes.
Yeah, because there's minimal
For most
downside.
people to go,
for
give it a go, see if you can sell it.
yeah, worst case scenario, we're only paying him 20 grand a year
Right.
or whatever. Plus,
So, if you love the charity sector, you can do the same thing for charities and donations, and you can become really good at that. If you love engineering, work
yeah,
for
we
an
don't mean
engineering
like
firm.
boiler room, Wolf of Wall Street cold calls.
You're not having to sell, mobile plans for Telstra.
Yeah.
Right? But if that's where you need to cut your teeth, because Telstra has a world-class sales training program, right? And this is the thing, these big, boring, ugly companies have put a lot of time and money
To systemizing.
to systemize how to teach you the fundamentals of sales. So if you do that for 6 months or a year, suck out all their best practice, and then apply that through your own research and materials and start to develop your own approach, bam.
Yeah, and confidence as well. It'll build up confidence.
Well, it builds your resilience against rejection, right? These world of no's.
In a world full of rejection, I feel like.
Yeah, 100%.
And
100%.
even on social media, getting rejected. As you said, at school, people are getting rejected or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It builds up the resilience. All right, let's switch gears a bit. So we've been talking sales. So how did you get to where you're currently up to? So we haven't actually mentioned, I'll probably in the intro, I'll tell what you're up to. But you've currently got a global company with your business partner.
Yeah, we've got about 45 on the team.
Yeah.
So we full-time operate in the UK, Australia and Canada. We've had regular pop-ups throughout Singapore and the US as well. So we run a structured 12-month training program that essentially takes businesses between 1 and 10 employees and helps them develop out their IP so they start to show up as one of the go-to brands in their industry. So think training company meets branding agency meets, structured implementation program. So we bring in a lot of expert mentors, entrepreneurs. So in the same way, what I didn't have at university was all these people that had done it.
Yeah.
What I try and bring in to work with our clients are some of Australia's and the world, because we do this all around the world, best mentors, leaders, entrepreneurs, etc. So that's essentially what we do. We're in the business of helping businesses build better business. So I have, I guess, some insights around what works and what doesn't work in entrepreneurship. Not so much that I'm some kind of guru, but just when you're in a community we've got 3,500 alumni now globally that have gone through our programs. They're all, business geeks. They're all testing best practice, and we tend to accumulate a lot of that. So, that's our business, and I guess I was building that through my 20s. I made a lot of money, and I was burnt out and depressed. And everyone used to tell me that money won't make you happy.
But you never believe it.
I honestly, I'm not even trying to convince people that you should believe it. I'm saying go out and make a lot of money, and at some point you'll reach threshold. Because I don't think you can jump it. I think it sounds like bullshit to go, you got to do something meaningful that makes you really happy and that's worthwhile in the world. But when you don't have money, it's just like,
I'm exactly the same. I remember sitting in assembly in high school, and people would say, "Doesn't matter how much money I make." I'm like,
Yes,
really want to get.
It really does.
I'd love to get a new PlayStation game or whatever. It's like, I'm talking like $100 would have changed.
100%.
And I'm like, I would love to have a lot of money. I'm like,
so I actually think cash is important. So I think the first thing you should do, chase the cash, go hard, master the ability to bring in cash. The thing you want to be careful of is to make sure you don't lock yourself into a lifestyle. Right? Like the mistake that I see people make is they'll start making a lot of cash and they'll have a family and they'll get a big house and big cars and they'll create a kind of a standard around that, and then they're trapped.
Yeah.
They can't pivot into something new.
It's more meaningful.
Because that's more meaningful or more aligned to their jam. Because now they've got this install base of like a family and layers, and
they need to earn X amount of money every
month.
month.
They've got to earn that, right? Because to try and change your family's direction into, we're going to get out of this fancy house and fancy thing and fancy this, and we're going to go to this cool direction, that can be very difficult because it ends. There's a lot of inertia in that sort of stuff. So my recommendation, I was fortunate that this was my experience as well. I made a lot of money while I was single and could make any decision I wanted.
Yeah, no
I could live a very selfish life, which was cool. But for 2 years I was depressed. And I'm like, I've got this cash, I've got this business, I've got this, and this wasn't the current business, Dent. This was our original business, Triumphant Events. But there was this realization of, I got the money, but I don't got the happiness.
I thought money equaled.
Well, what money gave me was snowboarding trips and deep powder and like all the scuba diving, and I'm just like, I went and spent 3 weeks in Thailand doing a Thai boxing, like that kind of. I love Tim Ferriss's book 4 Hour Work Week, and he's talking about these mini vacations and mini retirements, like 6 weeks to 2 months at a time. So the money was letting me do all that, but there are all these superficial adventure things where you go on a couple of adventures and you kind of done them all. What was missing for me was a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, a sense of something beyond just the veneer. And again, I believe you've got to have done the scuba diving and the snowboarding and,
get it out of your system.
You know, been to the biggest and coolest nightclubs in the world and like have kind of had that experience to see the contrast, right? And look, I see some people that are in their 50s that are still living that life. And for some of them, they love that. For some of them, they're deeply unhappy. For me, I started to, and I guess this tracks back to what I saw when I was kind of going off track at uni. I take what I'm doing and I project it into the future a couple of decades and I go, will I still be happy? And the answer is no. And so I took a bit of a sabbatical. I went to Bali for a couple of years, and sabbatical, basically I sold my business back to my business partner. And I'm just like, because I was cooked, right? And I've always prided myself on my merit, my ability to build results and bring it to the table. And I felt like I was so lost. I had all this skill set, I could make all this money, but it had lost so much of its meaning. I was just like, I can't keep doing this. Like, it was physically making me ill to have to keep doing what I was doing. And I got in that loop, and there was just no way out of it. So I'm like, okay, I gotta go change my world. So I ended up, long story, but I ended up living in Bali for 2 years. And a mentor of mine then, I asked, and I kind of said, I'm experiencing this kind of existential crisis. I want to make a difference in the world. I'm not sure what to do. I don't know what my purpose is. Everyone says you got to have this purpose. And like, I used to see people like Kelly Slater, that was like 7 years old saying, I want to be a champion surfer. It's just like he knew his thing.
Which is incredibly rare.
It's super rare.
Everyone thinks everyone else knows their purpose.
Yeah,
but no one knows it.
No one knows
except
it,
for,
right?
the 0.1.
And even Andre Agassi, right? Like, forced into it by his dad.
Yeah.
So while he's an iconic tennis player, his early years, if you read the book Open, were miserable.
Yeah.
Right? So, you never know the full backstory. But the point is, I felt lost, and I felt like other people knew what they were meant to be doing, and I wanted that.
Yeah.
And that was the chasm.
The comparison. That's where it gets dangerous. The comparison.
Yeah.
And with social media, as you said, I don't think you had social media at the time of this, but you could have been scuba diving, snowboarding. Everyone thinks you have this awesome life, but really you were depressed.
Yeah. Oh, and no, we had Facebook then, for sure. Yeah. So there was definitely that element. If you went through my Facebook, you'd be like, this guy's living the dream.
Yeah.
But again, there's a guru once told me, nothing from the senses will ever satisfy the soul. It's like, you got to find something that feeds the soul. So anyway, this mentor of mine, buddy of mine in Bali said, give your gifts. Like, the secret is to give your gifts for a period of time. So give in a way that makes you feel fulfilled, that's a skill set or a talent, without the expectation of anything in return. So no money or no adulation in return. Because a lot of people do something for free, but what they're really wanting is the thanks and the recognition and the virtue signaling that kind of comes from that, right? So he's like, the trick is find a way in which you can give something of your talents and expertise where you are happy to give it for the giving alone.
Something that's fulfilling enough that you don't need to thank you don't need any recognition.
Exactly. So I had a background in events. We used to run big 1,000 people sort of events. I knew how to do that. I knew how to sell, etc. And I was at this yoga class with this good-looking yoga instructor that I ended up dating for a while. And but the point was, is she said, hey, we need volunteers to help run this big festival that's coming up. And so I said I'd volunteer, and what do you want me to do? And they're like, oh, could you hand out these flyers on the corner of the street, right? And there's this back of my mind that's going like, I'm a successful entrepreneur. I could do all this stuff. I could run this freaking thing, and you've got me handing stuff out in the street. So my ego was like, tell someone how cool you are.
Yeah.
Right? But then there's this voice going, just give your gifts. You can do this. Do it really well. So I did it really freaking well. And I'm like,
sales.
And I'm inspiring all the other flyer hander-outers to be like, how to do it in a fun, cool way. And I'm like jumping across the street going, you haven't got one of these yet. You got to be there. And it was this thing. And as a result of me showing up like that, just giving my gifts, having fun, there was a problem. And then it's like, oh, how do we solve this problem? I'm like, oh, I could probably help do that. Let me just handle it. And all of a sudden I just started handling these problems to the point where the problem started getting more and more complicated. This event was not particularly well put together, right? So I can get in, and all of a sudden I'm solving team issues, I'm solving logistics issues, I'm solving like supplier delivery and setup issues, and I'm just kind of and all of a sudden the owner of the festival goes, who is this guy? Right? And all of a sudden I'm connected to the owner. Throughout that whole festival, I essentially became not quite the 2IC, but the 3IC of the whole thing. I met everybody who was everybody in this sort of the expat and the local Balinese community, because this event sort of brought everyone together. And that set me off on this adventure that allowed me to connect to this level, this kind of underground community of entrepreneurs in Bali. And I became known as like the business guy.
Yeah.
And I would just give my experience and advice around business. And that would make me happy. Like I didn't need any money for it. I'd get juiced. We'd create business plans and post-it notes on walls, and I'd help people reshape their ideas and their thinking or whatever.
And seeing the transformation is like, that's what it's...
Right. And all of a sudden it just became so freaking obvious. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to accelerate people's entrepreneur journeys, help them make the most of the times that we're in, right? And then I look at that and go, yes, but I'm not good enough to do that.
Yeah.
And that's where the wrestle of the imposter monster comes in, where it's like, yeah, but that's a noble calling. And how do I get better at doing that? And I didn't want to be a business coach or a business guru. So the way I had to do that was to find great people and create a program and a whole thing that would kind of facilitate that. But yeah, so for the last decade, I've felt very on purpose, but that wasn't where it started.
Yeah, so it sounds like if we're going back to this New York to London analogy, so you start heading in the direction of New York and you got the bartending job because you're like, I'm not going to go anywhere with this, I just want to get here, and you start heading that direction, but then you kind of go off course when you just start traveling and you're not doing anything for purpose.
Well, I think if you zoom out a bit before, you can go Sydney to New York or London to New York or whatever it was, but if you go back even further, back to some of the first airplanes where they didn't even have navigation, they didn't have satellites keeping them on track, so it's more like wildly off course to wildly off course, and then over time you start being able to, I think the challenge is a lot of people that might be listening or watching this, they don't know they're meant to be going to London. Like they don't even know the destination.
That's what I'm saying.
So it's like, just get good at flying.
Yeah. Just head in the direction of the destination.
Get good at, not even a destination. But this is, I guess, and we're in a metaphor, right? So it doesn't really matter. But it's like, the reason I say get good at sales is because it doesn't need to be a destination, it's a skill set. It's like, if you know you're meant to be in the air, you don't need to go anywhere, but get good at loops, get good at barrel rolls, get better at turning and pivoting and changing direction and landing and taking off than anyone. So when the destination does become clear...
And that's like networking. Build a network. You don't know what the network's going to be for, but once you're meeting all these cool people, suddenly you realize, oh, I want to do this. You can go bang and you can just jumpstart it, as opposed to having no network and knowing no one.
100%.
So sales, network, all that stuff you can start building. And as we, always say, being young is a superpower. You've got time. If anything, you've got no money, you've got no experience, but
and you've got a lot of people wanting to support you. If you've got, Eric Ries made famous MVP for meaningful vision, for minimum viable product, right? I think everything about being young is if you can connect yourself to the commitment to solve a problem for someone else for a purpose higher than just solving that problem, whether it's the UN Global Goals or a charity or there's something beyond just wanting to make money, even if it is about making money. And you've got a passion for that and an enthusiasm for that. The doors that will open, the people that will support that young hustle, I mean, there's something in Young Hustle.
Oh, 100%. It's even like...
That's a book.
I had this friend from America. She was studying abroad, and we connected because she does film and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'll introduce you to someone I know. And she came in, and she doesn't have much experience, but she was super driven. And she's like, oh my God, it's nice to meet you. And she met all these people, and she's like, this is insane. I'm meeting all these people. And it's like, yeah, because you're young and passionate, and people want to help other people. If you can say, you know, oh yeah, I mentored that person when they're 30 and they're like doing all successful. That's big clout for you.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. And people don't realize. It's like I kind of got lucky with the job with you. I came across the ad and I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'd love to do this. But realistically, I would be reaching out. I'd be Googling who can I find who's in this area, and I would have done it myself. So I kind of got lucky on that end. I did still see the form and messaged you and everything.
But your energy was right, right? Because you didn't come in trying to charge a fortune. You didn't try to come in knowing it all. You basically came in going, I'm going to work for cheap. I'm going to do great work. And what I would love in return is to learn as much as I possibly can. Like, that was your energy from the start, right? And as a result, the opportunity presented itself. Had you been different, it wouldn't have happened like this.
I remember you said, you were like, yeah, look, I've had guys wanting $90,000 for this job and stuff. And it's like, that's not what I'm after. And I'm like, 90,000? I'll do it for free.
That's right. Right?
But that's my uni.
Because being in this environment, you can get way more than $90,000 worth of value.
Yeah.
And I think my point is, you didn't get lucky. You had done the groundwork, or you'd shifted your mindset already. The moment your mindset shifts, you will find the opportunities that are right.
It's more leveraging luck when it comes.
Yeah, 100%.
That's the thing, because people always say, oh, they got lucky. Yeah, Justin Bieber blew up through viral, but he put a video up on YouTube when no one else was doing it.
Yeah.
It's like, sure, he just got incredibly lucky, but no one else was putting up videos on YouTube.
Exactly.
It's the same with everyone. Everyone in that area. There's a whole, the quote, took me 18 years to become an overnight success sort of thing. Awesome. Before we wrap up, got one final question. I ask every guest this question.
Cool.
It's a big one. What would your number one advice be for the younger generation? High school, uni, what would your number one advice be?
Make the world better. Starting with you, and then picking someone else that's got a problem that needs fixing, fix that for them. So how can you solve some of your own problems, right? So how can you look at some of your own, mental contradictions, and how can you make that better? How can you help someone else in a way where something that you can provide to them makes them better? How can you do that for clients? How can you do that for businesses? How could you do that for a charity? How could you do that for people that you'll never meet? I think if the bias is towards how to make the world better, not from just an environmental kind of perspective, although that's important as well, but I mean at a human perspective. If the perspective is how can I make this better, I see a lot of people like going for jobs and getting jobs where they're literally just wanting their ego. They're wanting a position for their ego.
They want the watch and the nice car.
They want the watch and the nice car, or just the prestige of I work at Google or Atlassian or whatever it is. And it's ego, it's click, it's a veneer. There's not a lot of I want to truly serve and truly solve a problem and master the art of solving a problem. So the way I put that together is make the world better, which is basically get really good at solving problems for people and then learn how to do that at scale. Yeah. And I think if everyone had that mindset and it was a bit selfless, a bit more selfless in their approach to that, I think they'd be more successful, and I think the world would be better off.
Yeah, great. And that's basically what we kind of spoke about, you going from the drugs and having fun and stuff to kind of flipping this switch and going, I need to do something that's more solving problem, making more, first of all, solving my problem, and then solving problems for others. Yeah,
well, my dad said, going back off topic, but my dad said before I started my boat cleaning business, and he was a boat builder, and he said the only reason money will ever come to you is if you're fixing something for someone. And his mindset was physical. You've got to actually fix things. Yeah. But he was right. Fix things for someone else and money will flow. So I took that from the physical into sometimes more of the intangible, like people have got a business that needs fixing, or they don't have a clear vision and purpose. That needs fixing. So this idea of fixing things for people in a way that makes the world a better place, I think, is the key.
Awesome. And where can people find you if they want to hear more?
Right. Glen Carlson.
Yeah, just search it, Google, Instagram, whatever it is.
It should come up. More specifically, if they want to go to Dent Global. But Glen Carlson and Dent, you'll find the podcast, you'll find the book, you'll find the videos, you'll find the business, you'll find all the go. There's plenty of rabbit holes to go down.
Awesome, Glenn.
Thanks, brother.
All right, if you are still here, thank you so much for listening to this entire episode. If you got some value out of it, it would mean the world to me if you left a review on iTunes or shared it with your friends or family. Otherwise, I'll be putting up videos of this episode on Instagram and Facebook, so check it out there at Byron Dempsey or at Driven Young Podcast, and I'll see you on the next one.